Look at
Hi everyone, welcome back to John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, Chad Kroger. To whom it may concern, I released a video a little while back about how the music of Creed has started to reach a point where I think a lot of it can be appreciated for what it did for the modern music landscape of the 90s and early 2000s. And while going through the numerous butt rock bands of that era, I paused on giving my opinion on Nickelback, mainly because I think the question of what do you think about Nickelback is a loaded question within itself. The culture has ultimately decided that Nickelback is one of the worst bands of all time, and I'm not sure when this commentary started, but a lot of that hatred as we progressed into the 2010s shifted from Nickelback to that of Imagine Dragons. Obviously, the internet exacerbates this idea of polarity and superlatives. So do I think that either band is the worst? God, no. I mean, there's far worse bands. Anybody ever hear of Train? Subjectivity is the key factor here, but the objective piece is that honestly both bands, primarily Nickelback, are just known not for angelic to the core level badness, but just a lack of wanting to push forward past what they've done in the past, leading to an overall sense of banality. So here in the Music Corner today, I wanted to investigate this Lady Gaga style and look for evidence through each Nickelback album to determine if they are in fact really all that bad. I would do this for Imagine Dragons too, but do I look like I hate myself? Let's kick this thing off before I change my mind. And hey, if I'm singing Nickelback songs by the end of this video, you can't blame me, alright? This is who I am now. Sheesh! I'm willing to give Nickelback's debut a little benefit of the doubt due to the mid-90s release date and the lack of a major label backing it, but man, Chad's vocals are sometimes nearly unlistenable on this. I mean, Little Friend starts this thing off on a very unflattering note, and I mean that literally. The note that he hits is awful. Pusher is a little more melodic and is similar to later Nickelback hits, just with a little oomph, but again, Chad's vocals are hideous. It's like a really bad cover band cross between Pearl Jam and Nirvana that is suffering from a smoking addiction. The title track though here, Curb, actually rips. It's got a real killer groove that Nickelback would pull off later as their bread and butter, and I'll admit, the album gets better as it goes along. And the instrumentals are efficient and skillful, if not just pretty ordinary. The rawer tracks unfortunately point out just how bad Chad's pitch is, like on C Groove, where he's genuinely so off-key, it's fucking hilarious. This isn't a bad album, partly because the DIY ruggedness of the instrumentals saves it from Chad's looming presence on the mic. And yeah, I get it. It may not be for everyone, and I can definitely respect what they're going for here, but I'd have to give this a 4.5 out of 10. Right from the start of Nickelback's sophomore record, it's readily apparent that they've tinkered with their sound since their debut, drawing back on the dynamics and the harder edge and ushering in more accessible, catchier melodies a la Creed and Foo Fighters. Chad's vocals though, while vastly improved, I'll give him that, are still really rough here. Breathe finds the restrained production enlivening the pace of the track, but I just feel like Chad ruins it with his strained delivery and his gruffness that honestly sounds forced and is really unappealing. On the other hand, Cowboy Hat is a solid alt-rock track that coasts along with acoustic electric cross that's ever so slightly dingy to evade the mainstream type hits that they would later produce. And Chad sounds pretty good here. He dials back the gruff approach and the bellows for something that's a little bit more balanced and stable. A highlight of this album is its runtime, clocking in 8 minutes shorter than their debut. Songs like Old Enough and Deep are under 3 minutes, benefiting from their loud to soft dynamics, their chunky guitar riffs, and their driving percussive grooves. There's a lack of filler here too, and that's not to say that the album's perfect. There are missteps in Nickelback's dabbling with the nu metal stylings. It's not bad, but I think it misses the point of what made nu metal so interesting and appealing at that time, so it comes off a little bit more stock from Nickelback's perspective. But yeah, this is a huge step in the right direction production-wise and performance-wise, and it's a nice precursor as to what would come next in their career. So I'd have to give this one a 6.25 out of 10. Released on 9/11, Nickelback's third album is often rated as one of their best, and that's with good reason. This is the moment where their star began to shine, merging their hard rock foundations with a commercial appeal that is undeniably catchy and honestly sometimes euphoric. Again, this one has no room for filler, with 10 tracks coming in at 39 minutes. And damn it if they didn't outdo themselves and improve everything from the last two albums. Re-listening to How You Remind Me, I was just recalling how much of a good radio rock song it is. And overall, it's just a great track with stellar writing from Chad, and a killer performance from the entire band. Yeah, no. Woke Up This Morning remains one of my favorite rockers from Nickelback, mainly because of how they incorporate the mid-90s Metallica groove metal aesthetic into their sound. Plus, Chad's candid lyrics and energetic delivery make it sound rawer and punchier, unlike how forced it came off in their earlier projects. The buzzsaw, guitar-riven alt-rock crunch of Never Again and Too Bad are scorching, aggressive, and consistently catchy, but also have a pop sensibility at their core. The writing is also very authentic, saddening, and straightforward, something that I don't think Chad got away with after the 2000s ended. What I like about this record is that it doesn't stop at the mega hits. Just 4 dives deeper into trauma and domestic violence, the tone of the instrumentation matching the macabre lyrical themes. The heavy sonic template gets even heavier on tracks like Hollywood, Where Do I Hide, and Hangnail, cementing the band's talent and progression in making consistently engaging songs that are filled to the brim with resolve and confidence as well as defiance. Then there's the modern alt-rock pop hybrids of Money Bought and Good Times Gone. I find Chad operating at his best lyrically, the peppy vibe of the former making it an instant jam. So yeah, I love this album actually. I think it's awesome. Just killer track after killer track. Do I think it's a classic? Fuck it. Yeah, I do. I think this album's a classic. Quote me on it. It's just so unapologetically to the point and knows what it's doing. So how can you be mad at that? At that point, it just goes down to personal taste, because you really can't throw shade at the band for performing at this level. I'd have to give this one an 8.25 out of 10, and I am proud to do that because this album kicks ass. I won't be standing up for long. I better learn how to crawl. Learn how to crawl. Ooh, we're hitting peak. Everything that worked on Silver Side Up, it's dialed up to a fucking 20 on the long road. And after listening to this, I don't mind it for 1 second. Someday, somehow. The band rarely misses on this project, but when the quality's as good as it is, the misses barely even matter. Let's talk about the singles first, because Nickelback, unlike its predecessor, on the long road, they do not front-load this project, making the track list a little bit more unpredictable, which is a good sign for the progression of the record. Someday is like How You Remind Me Part 2. The thing is, it's so catchy and well-written, you can't help but vibe along to it, just as you did with How You Remind Me. Feeling Way Too Damn Good is a little peek into where Nickelback would venture into the pop space in later albums, but this one has that little glimmer of post-grunge DIY in a good way, so it meshes with the pop leanings quite nicely. Plus, Chad sounds great on this record. He ditches the strain vocalizing for something that's more cool and passive, which allows for the bombastic moments to shine a lot more, especially when he lets out bigger howls on tracks like Because of You. My least favorite single, Figured You Out, is a little repetitive, following the same structure of the big hits on Silver Side Up, but even so, the hook on this thing soars. That being said, not a big fan of the misogynistic undertones and the creepy overtones on this one, something I definitely could have gone without. Clocking in at 40 minutes, Nickelback barely wastes any time on this album, with speedy punk rock metal hybrids like the opener Flat on the Floor setting the tone expertly. Believe it or not, Another Hole in the Head and Throw Yourself Away could have easily been singles in their own right, due to their mixture of straightforward radio rock and groove metal. Do This Anymore and Should Have Listened take a dial-back approach that works exponentially, and I love the closer See You at the Show, which is decidedly a lot more low-key. The vitality of Silver Side Up isn't quite as much there on the long road, and it kind of feels like a sequel to that album, just lacking the writing that made that project stand out. But that being said, I think it's pulled off tastefully, and I definitely feel like this one is more of a 7.75 out of 10 for me. This is a pretty good one. If The Long Road was Silver Side Up Part 2, then all the right reasons, is the apex of the Nickelback formula. It's Nickelback Prime. Aside from the creepy lyricism and juvenile themes, which can get a little repetitive on this project, I really have zero problems with this album. Follow You Home tempers its metal foundations with a southern rock flair that fits Chad's Riley delivered vocals. Fight for All the Wrong Reasons coasts along the same hard rock grooves, just to an even catchier effect. And Animals contains a speedy backbeat that drives the band's rawness to the forefront, without ditching the slicker coat of mainstream radio rock melodies that let this thing fly. Then there's the ballads on this thing that are among the best of Nickelback's career. I keep dreaming you'll be with me and you'll never go. Far Away was a smash hit for Nickelback when it came out, and it's still a smash hit now. And it shows Nickelback vying for the pop mainstream in a way they never did before. Plus, it's a breathless, well-written pop song that honestly reminded me of Don't Wanna Miss a Thing by Aerosmith. Savin' Me is a poignant, heartfelt venture into balladry that has a pre-chorus and chorus that most butt rock bands would have a lot of difficulty pulling off. If Everyone Cared is a slight miss for me, mainly due to its vapid lyrics, but overall it's inoffensive and fits well on the record. Photograph is a pitch-perfect example of why this Nickelback formula works so well, and that's its intersectionality between soft rock choruses and post-grunge grooves, putting together a butt rock blend that's just instantly infectious and honestly a lot more hooky than some of the club bangers of 2005 were. I will say Chad's tough guy routine does wear a little thin on Next Contestant and Side of a Bullet, almost dipping into the meme-worthy corniness of the material. That's not to say that the songs aren't fun, but it's just not exactly what I think of when I think of an authoritative Nickelback rock track. Last but not least, we got arguably the biggest hit single from Nickelback of their career, Rockstar, which serves almost as a fusion of Nickelback's mainstream sensibilities and their southern rock swagger that they exhibited first on See You at the Show. So it leaves the album on an enjoyable high note. Aside from some impersonal lyricism from Chad, this is butt rock at its finest and most engaging, showing off what the allure of Nickelback was without diving too much into the cornier aspects of their sound and style. So yeah, I'm really feeling this one just like I was feeling the other two, so guys, I'm having a fucking blast. What's going on? Were we sleeping on Nickelback this whole time? Were we? I'd have to say this one's a 7.5 out of 10 for me. Not the best Nickelback record, but definitely one that I enjoyed a lot. And at the end of the day, it's probably the most fun one.
Too pretty to be given and cheap. That's why she's making 6 figures, working 3 days a week.
I think this moment in time is where the public perception of Nickelback slowly started its nosedive. Dark Horse employed the production of a super producer that worked on AC/DC's Back in Black. So if Nickelback hadn't fully explored their amalgamation of hard rock grooves and mainstream pop hooks, they were going to go even further with Mutt at the helm. With that comes a lot of broadening of the harder edge, and softer vocals that lean a little bit too much in the top 40 Billboard worship. I'd Come For You, Never Gonna Be Alone, and Gotta Be Somebody are textbook Nickelback pop that takes the formula of Far Away and kind of dilutes it to its breaking point. But if we want to talk about a song that is a bona fide hit, that is the country-tinged closer, This Afternoon, which might be one of my top 5 favorite Nickelback songs. Sounds like cracking open a beer with your best buddies on a summer afternoon, and honestly, who doesn't want that feeling from a Nickelback track? Sometimes it's just something that they knock out of the park, and here it just sends us off on this album way better than we started. Get up, go out, me and all my friends. Something in Your Mouth kicks off the record. I know, it's a terrible title. With explosive yet pristine, clean riffs. But Chad's semi-rapped vocals are somehow the highest up in the mix. And I really wish they weren't, because these lyrics are painfully creepy and kind of desperate to sound sexy. It's just the most misguided thing about these mainstream Nickelback rockers from the late 2000s. And I feel like ratchet up the sexual discourse that bands like AC/DC had in the 80s and Aerosmith in the 90s, which isn't entirely bad on its face, but the implications made by Chad are the things that don't exactly work all that well nowadays and haven't aged all that well, leading to groups like Theory of a Dead Man frontman taking the misogynistic angle as the main draw of their band. So that's something that I could have also done without. Burn It to the Ground is the biggest rock anthem on this record, and it's practically the 2000s version of Machine Head, since it's literally used at like every major sporting event. And that's not by accident. The hook is killer, the riffs are crunchy, and it captures the roaring crowd vibe more than any other Nickelback album had done up to that point. Even if the lyrics are a little generic and one note, I actually thought Shakin' Hands was a better example of the sludgy rock that they were going for at that time, surprisingly evoking the melodic aspects of AC/DC. So far, the non-singles haven't been a problem for me in their discography, but here, these are among the worst deep cuts that I've ever heard from them. SEX is, you guessed it, just another sex-filled romp from Chad, and it's really weird hearing it from Chad Kroeger, of all people. The instrumental gives way to Chad telling us about his fantasies and what he enjoys in bed, and yeah, it's about as bad as you would expect. It's not terrible, but it's really repetitive, and I dislike it. And I'm not against sex being used in popular rock songs or mainstream radio in general, but like, there's a reason why Meg Thee Stallion is lauded for her sex-adjacent material. Because it's sexy, it's good, it's well performed, it fits a tone that's consistent. Here, it's just, it just sounds like Chad was really horny one day when he came into the studio, and then wrote all these songs as Mutt produced their most generic instrumentals yet. Because of that, I'd have to say that this one is a 5.75 out of 10 for me.
The only thing to save is the banner that you wave to be wrapped around your grave.
Did I just listen to the same album? Literally head to toe, Here and Now is the same thing again, and I should not be surprised, but I am. This Means War is a bold opener that calls back to a more chaotic metal-tinged groove from The Long Road, and it gives pretty solid mixing to Chad's vocals that add to the gruffness that he was looking for in the early records. But right about there is where the band starts to stop pushing the envelope, and they were barely doing anything out of the ordinary to begin with. Bottoms Up is Burn It to the Ground Part 2, just a party banger with a crunchy main riff and not much else. The pounding drums do accentuate Chad's more hardcore delivery, and though it's a little rudimentary, it's quite good in terms of performance and execution, definitely getting the blood pumping in a way that a lot of the rock tracks on Dark Horse just couldn't do. Yet after that, I really didn't enjoy any of the hard rock stuff on this album. Midnight Queen is a total mess, gunning for a speedier DIY approach that just can't get out of the way of Chad's laughable lyricism. Gotta Get Me Some slows it down with a slinkier bluesy groove, but it's let down by its repetitive kind of sing-songy hook that's a little grating and annoying. And what the fuck is Kiss It Goodbye? Seriously, it sounds like nothing else that Nickelback has ever done. I can't tell if they're being ironic with the double-track vocals and the dance-driven melodies, but it's definitely something that I would have, left off the track list, but it's something I won't forget. You can't talk about this album without talking about the obvious pop anthems that are on it. Yeah, 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 yeah. When We Stand Together has one of the most standout choruses of Nickelback's entire career. The rockabilly flair builds up a tension in the instrumental and the hook, making it turn out to be a very enjoyable pop rock song. Other ones of note on here are the ballads Holding On to Heaven and Trying Not to Love You, which are practically the same song. Do I mind? No, because they're inoffensive, slightly charming, and they don't highlight Chad saying weird shit about sex, so I'm good. Overall though, there's just not a lot to write home about Here and Now because it just features a lot of their most forgettable work. But there's enough here to elevate it above much of the cringier aspects of their discography, so I'd still say it's about a 5.5 out of 10 for me. What is this? I feel like they're punking their audiences. Because this is the same fucking album 3 or 4 times in a row now. I will give them credit for She Keeps Me Up though, because it's simultaneously a fun little bop and the most annoying fucking song you'll hear in your life. Everybody wants to be the sisters, mister. Hey, if you didn't know what to expect by now, why are you watching this? Coca-Cola. Million Miles an Hour kicks this record off with an edgy, paranoid, more spacious Nickelback rocker that adds up to a hook that's lazy and weak. Then there's Edge of a Revolution, which finally dives into lyrical themes where Chad isn't talking about, drinking or fucking or, that's pretty much all he talks about. No, he's pissed because, newsflash, The world is corrupt. Thank you, Nickelback, for telling us that. We would have never learned without your guiding light. In all seriousness, the popular tracks here, while I get what they're going for, are just suffering from the dilution of what made Nickelback interesting all those years ago. What Are You Waiting For is just yet another inspirational pop rock track. Satellite and Miss You are their typical lovelorn ballads that are just far away all over again, but not nearly as potent or catchy. I'll hand it to Nickelback for trying some new things here and there, with the funk and reggae vibes on Got Me Running Around kind of turning out to be wavy and fun. I was impressed by Sister Sin as a closer, too. The blues rock groove serving the band well and not diving too much into the sex-driven lyricism that has plagued much of the last few albums from Chad. And Get 'Em Up is actually one of the best late-period Nickelback songs, telling a quirky, hilarious story that is buoyed by a rollicking instrumental. It's honestly a total fucking blast, and I love the mixture of genres here. This album isn't anything special, but it's clearly their best since All the Right Reasons, so that does count for something. So I'd have to give this one a 6.75 out of 10.
Flying down the highway like a bat out of hell. My buddy Bradley's in the middle, Darcy's looking out the window.
Did I expect Nickelback to dive into the straightforward metal route? Nope. But does it have all the same Nickelback hallmarks of every album they've released since 2003? Yes. So of course I do have some problems with it. The title track on Feed the Machine features impressive riffs and a sharp change in tone, but the hook here just doesn't go far enough to warrant such a stylistic change, because it still sounds like the usual setup and delivery that we've gotten from Chad for many years. The chunky riffs on Coin for the Ferryman are pulled off much better here, supplying us with a slicker version of the punchier stuff on Silver Side Up. There's also a hint of weird that pulls it all together that makes it a lot more of a cohesive track, so that's always a plus. But I just don't understand why we need the classic Nickelback ballads on this thing. Song on Fire, Every Time We're Together, and After the Rain are proficient ballads for sure, but I think this project would benefit with the pop-adjacent stuff being left off completely. Because if they were, this is a straight-up prog metal record, and it's kinda good. I'm running for the river. Must Be Nice, For the River, and The Betrayal, Act 1 and Act 3, not sure why there's no Act 2 here, hashtag justice for Act 2, are all the best examples of Nickelback pushing themselves into weirder sonic palettes, and exciting genre bends that would honestly benefit them if they just fully steered into. The lyrical themes about modern global politics are a little ham-fisted, but important, and still way better than what we would usually get in a lackluster Nickelback album. So because of that, I'm feeling a 7.0 out of 10 on this one. Pretty fun deviation from the norm from them. It's a hell of a good time.
The club downtown, gonna need a lot of credit if you're
Hold on. A Nickelback album in the year of our Lord 2022 has no business being this fucking good. What? I need a minute. What the? Sure, like, Chad's vocals aren't always the best, and the radio rock design isn't all that great, but come on, this album rocks. The metal crunch of San Quentin is genuinely the coolest and smoothest that their sound has come off in literally 2 decades, and Chad sounds reinvigorated on this track, like revitalized in the best way. San Quentin! Normally songs like Skinny Little Missy don't do it for me, but there's just a hint of nostalgia in the composition that reminds me that their pop-leaning rockers about women weren't always that bad before Dark Horse. The ballads, which are here and take up a good amount of the track listing, I normally take issue with, but it's like they realized how by the numbers and wrote those ballads had became, because they changed up the formula and make the songs far more palatable. Those Days is a heartfelt look back at their career that, while generic, works a lot like Photograph did all those years ago. And Tidal Wave has an atmospheric undertone that transitions between the hook and the verses quite nicely, surprisingly showing off the band's ability to play with dynamics. Does Heaven Even Know You're Missing might be the only misstep here, mainly because the instrumentation clashes with Chad's screeching vocals. But otherwise, the mid-tempo jams like Horizon and Just One More remind us why Nickelback was so adored by us as a society. And Chad's voice hits a bit of a crooner energy to it every once in a while, showing that he's really giving it his all, and that's impressive given the fact that he had vocal cord surgery years ago. High Time is a funky, catchy rocker that has a lot more swagger that I thought Nickelback could possess at this stage of their career, and that hook is euphoric. Vegas Bomb is the only straightforward rocker outside of San Quentin here, and it tilts ever so slightly to their pop foundations on Dark Horse, and to be fair, it totally works because because it still has that undercurrent of weird from their previous record that I always felt suited Nickelback in a very tasteful way. So yeah, holy shit, man. This is exactly what a Nickelback record should be. I'd have to give this a 7.25 out of 10. What a great way to end this video.
Never made it as a wise man. I couldn't.
So, is Nickelback really all that bad? No. Because they're not bad in the first place. They're a band that knew what worked for them and got super successful doing it, while also making millions of fans happy while doing it. The fact they're still around and making albums that are fun and enjoyable just speaks to the staying power that they have, and the genuine connection that they've made with people over the years, myself included. I promised myself I wouldn't rank their albums or get too in the weeds for this video, but here's my discography ranking.
Sounds so bad, so bad, it's too bad, it's too bad, too late, so wrong, so low, it's too bad.
This was a lot of fun. The hit rate for Nickelback is far higher than their misses. So with that, I'm proud to say that this investigation was not only a success, but Nickelback, you are cleared of worst band charges. Bravo. Now it's time to put Imagine Dragons on trial. Alright, bye.
It's like every time I turn around, I fall in love and find my heart face down, and where it lands is where it should